Welcome to Learn to Thrive with ADHD. This is the podcast for adults with ADHD or ADHD-like symptoms. I'm your host, Coach Mandy John. I'm here to make your life with ADHD easier. Let's get started. All right, welcome back to the Learn to Thrive with ADHD podcast. Today we have April Kerr, and she is from Ireland. And so she was my first client, actually, that I worked with from Ireland, and it was so much fun to just hear about, the differences across the world, right? So I'm just going to let April go ahead and introduce herself. April, do you want to tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I have to laugh when you say, someone from Ireland. I was thinking the amount of profanities we use in just normal talking must have been a bit of a shock. But I am a nurse, a registered nurse. I have two children, and after a couple of months after the birth of my second child, it was during COVID and it was quite stressful, and I went to a therapist and he kind of off the record diagnosed me with ADHD. So I went to a psychiatrist and I got, medication, and he really hammered home the need for an ADHD life coach. And so I jumped on Google and I found you. And it was the little things that I really struggled with that you were like, it was so simple. And I came back, and some of the tips and tricks you gave me just to manage small little things in life. Even my husband was like, did Mandy tell you to do that? It was just like you became God in our house. And and one of the main ones, which sounds so silly, was I have a full gym in my garage and our garage. And I couldn't, for the life of me, get out there and train. And I remember you saying, why? What's the hardest part? And I remember thinking, it's like 20 steps from my front door to the garage door. Why can't I do this? And I said, well, the lock's up really high and it's usually 5 o'clock in the morning and it's cold and dark. And you said, and I said, oh, I'll have my water bottle with me, and I'll probably have my phone and, my earphones and I'll there's just too many things, and I need 2 hands for the lock. And you said, so bring a bag. And I remember going, why didn't I think of that? It was the simplest solution to a problem that wasn't a problem. And I felt so stupid saying it to you. But the reality was I didn't think of that simple solution. That was really a barrier to me getting out and training. Because once I got out there, I love training. Like, it wasn't lifting weights. None of that was the issue. It was just getting from my front door to the garage door. And that was the killer. And I think that was the first session I had with you. And I was like, oh, this is going to be life-changing. And it literally was. It literally turned out to be life-changing.
Well, and one of the really fun things that April didn't mention there that she did was she completely remodeled that home gym situation. Like, you had a lot of fun.
That's right.
Doing that. So,
oh my gosh, yes. So as the sessions went on, I was saying, I didn't like things about the gym because it was just, solid cinder block walls, and there was nothing there brought me joy. And you said, well, why don't you make it your happy place? So I painted it in this dark teal and black, and built myself a lifting platform and went wild. I got full gym equipment, which I consulted you on what was the best stuff to get. I got absolutely everything that a commercial gym has. And it was really funny because we bumped into friends of ours recently, they came over, and we hadn't seen them in about 5 years. And the husband was really into weightlifting, and he came out to look at my gym, and he didn't say anything, and he kind of just took a few steps in. And I was like, after they left, I said, that was a really weird reaction. I said to Graham, my husband, and Graham was like, that was jealousy, April. He was jealous of your ridiculous gym because you put a coat of paint on the wall. It looks amazing. But yeah. So, and the funny thing was that was just the beginning, because I in my nursing, I went on to do, like, I've been a nurse injector. I've done facial aesthetics for the longest time. And I haven't been happy. Like, since having my daughter, there was just too much headspace. The ratio of people wanting little tweaks to body dysmorphia got bigger and bigger. So trying to make people happy got harder. And I really began to hate the industry, and it made me nervous to inject, because you don't know what client was going to, come up with an issue next. And although there were few and far between, when I had my babies, I didn't have the that level of headspace to give the career. And so as in my work with you, I kind of spoke about that, and you, like, triggered me into thinking, well, what would I like to do? And I realized that when I'd be injecting faces, it could be, anyone. And I'd constantly ask them, and would you not set up your own business doing that? And so I realized that I actually really enjoyed talking to people about, setting up their business, and encouraging them and inspiring them to, maybe get out of an unhappy environment. And so I ended up completely changing tack, and now I teach mainly nurses and doctors how to set up their own aesthetic business. I'm completely away from a needle. I haven't lifted one in a while, and all of my work is, I would say coaching, but you're so kind. I'm not kind. Or I give direction.
I think my favorite
I lie,
session,
I am kind.
You are. But my favorite session was, I had pointed something out to you, and I was asking you, it was something about marketing, and I was asking you and kind of going through the questioning, allowing you to kind of come to the answer. And when you got to the answer, you told me to F off. Do you remember that?
Like a full force. I remember, like, shouting at you.
And I loved it because it was proof that I was right. But it was just fun. Like, April and I have had a lot of fun over the time that we worked together for a good while. And it was just always fun, like, just getting on with a friend. And I always enjoyed, like, I'm so glad that you laughed here on the podcast, because I always so enjoyed when you laughed. And so it's April's personality to just be, like, jovial, really. With a little bit of cussing.
I can't dispute how much fun I had learning from you. And I never thought, like, so I won't lie, I always thought coaching was real BS. I really did. I thought it was just like the fakest career ever. And then I got you, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's way better than any therapy you could ever have, because it's so proactive. And it, like that, you really are challenged to think, and to, like that, like you say, come to your own conclusion. And I do remember telling you to F off. I'm being very censored now, because I would have, I would use the real words.
Let's keep this one PG.
But yeah, exactly. For the kids out there.
A question I had for you was, what advice would you have for adults? Because you were diagnosed as an adult. What advice would you have for newly diagnosed adults with ADHD?
That's a very interesting question. I found you have to go through a process, for sure. And a lot of people, it's grieving. For me, it wasn't. It was just pure joy. I was so happy. It just explained so many things that I had done. I might have grieved for a millisecond, and the rest of it was just, oh my God, that's why I said, oh my gosh, that's why I said that 20 years ago, and and it just answered so many questions. The hardest part, I was nearly afraid of being kind to myself, because, and I remember saying this to you at the time, because I have fought through all of my ADHD, what I would say attributes now, then I would have said limitations. Because I fought through them so hard, I ran myself into the ground, and I feared being kind to myself was going to be a weakness. And I did learn to change my pace and to allow these, these moments where I'm late to everything. Absolutely everything. I always have been. And with my best friend, I used to annoy her so much. When I was diagnosed, she put Find My Friends on her phone, so she knows where I am. So, because I would lie and I'd say, I'm on the road, I'm just past this bridge. And she's like, no, you're not. You're still at home. You have not left your house. And, but it was so funny because I spent my life lying to her. And then when I was diagnosed, it was like her reaction changed. So I didn't need to lie. She understood why I didn't have the capacity to be on time, why I, most likely have lost my car keys 10 seconds before I'm ready to walk out the door. And I'm running around chasing my tail in a sweat, just trying to get out the door in time. And she became so forgiving of me that it actually allowed me to be forgiving of myself. And her kindness to me was pivotal in me being kind to myself, to be honest. So yeah, I think just allow for the parts of us. I say this to everyone. My ADHD is, and my husband would say the same. My husband says it's a superpower, and it really is. But I wouldn't be someone who can't get out of bed with it. Do you know, I'd be a bit different than that. I'd be very much driven, and it's just trying to stay on track that I find very difficult. But both of our descriptions of my ADHD would be, I am like Superman walking around with kryptonite in my pocket. That like I am able to achieve whatever I put my mind to, but I will lose my keys 5 seconds before I have to walk out the door. And I just have to be aware of that is an attribute of it. I won't even say limitation, because there are too many good things with it. That's what I would say. Be kind to yourself.
Yeah. People are kind of all over the place with that. Like I've spoken to people that say there's nothing good about ADHD, but I'm more in the team of, there are lots of good things about it, but there are lots of challenges that come with it too. So what do you think would be helpful to the people listening?
It's funny. I would struggle a lot with emotional dysregulation. And I didn't realize to what an extent that is a part of ADHD. And I believe it or not, I went and I did DBT, which is actually for borderline personality disorder. But a lot of the emotional dysregulation overlaps with ADHD. They teach you skills. And the skills are absolutely amazing. And believe it or not, the skills they actually cross over into sales. And it's about how to get what you want from a situation. And as I'm learning them, like I'm in a group, with all these people with severe borderline personality disorder. And there's me going, do you know they teach that when they teach you how to sell? And I was just like, no, I'm not the person that should be here taking pure joy from it. But these skills are really good. Everything from, the funny thing is, the first skill they teach you is to ground yourself. And this is one of the funniest things, this is just anecdotal. But one of the funniest things I found was, I don't know, it's quite well known as the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's, if you're really stressing, you just name 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can smell, 2 things that you can taste, whatever, right? Of course, I have ADHD, so that stresses me out. I'm like, there's too many things to remember. How many 5 things I can see for, I don't. And so I would actually end up having a complete sweat just trying to remember. And that became the running joke in the group, that I was the only one with ADHD. So I would stress over the thing that's meant to ground you. But these skills were so good. There was 12 skills, and you'd apply them to daily life. And I would highly recommend anyone who struggles with emotional dysregulation at all to go and, really look up how they work. A lot of it is mindfulness, which I really do struggle with, and a lot of ADHDers do, because we can't stay focused for long enough on one topic. But even if it's something like, I remember the DBT coach saying, just driving. Just if you're driving, just be driving. Don't be listening to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be on the phone to anyone. Just have your two hands on the wheel and be mindful of what's in front of you, on the road. Where are your hands going? Are you changing gear? What exactly are you doing? And that in itself is a grounding experience. And I do think that, because we can fly off the handle, and we can when we get overwhelmed, and it's always when we get overwhelmed that it triggers in nearly anger. And that's what because it wasn't great for my marriage. It's not great for anyone's marriage, but it's not great when your go-to reaction is anger, and your poor partner is trying to just do their best and to keep everything on an even keel, and you fly off the handle because there's no milk in the fridge and you told them to get milk, so yeah. I learned a lot about just trying to regulate emotions, and I would say that was probably one of the best things I've done for my ADHD. It doesn't always help, and it doesn't, don't get me wrong, it does not diminish your feelings. Like the DBT just helps you cope with the emotion, but your feelings and emotions are still very much valid, and that's another thing that had come up in my marriage quite a bit, that oh well, she has ADHD, so she kind of flies off the handle a bit, and like, I think Graham had to be educated in, no, but I'm still angry with you because you did that stupid thing that, could have cost us a lot of money, or, wasted time, or whatever it was. Just because I'm angry doesn't mean, or just because I have ADHD doesn't mean my anger is not valid. So yeah, the emotional dysregulation has been one of the hardest things I've had to manage in the last while.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because that was also a problem for me personally. Early in my marriage, I would just get so angry, fly off the handle. And then when my kids came along, I would just instantly yell. There was no pause between thinking about yelling or anything like that. I would just yell a lot, and I would get really angry. And it was sometimes unsafe. And I really took that on as a character flaw in myself. I just kind of went, oh, well, my dad was that way. He would fly off the handle. Well, probably because he had ADHD. That's probably where this comes from.
Yeah, but most likely.
Yeah. The emotional dysregulation, I want to say this for everybody listening. If you are having a hard time, if you're having these huge feelings that you feel like you can't control, you can control them. Number one, it's just gaining an awareness, knowing what it feels like when it comes. I have another client who I kind of taught her through coaching. It was anger that she was working on. And I'm like, okay, where do you feel it when you get angry? And it gave her enough of a pause to notice that she was feeling a tension in her arms, to not react. And so her reaction at that time was going to be to throw these blankets. And she felt the tension in her arms, and it gave her enough time to go, okay, how do I want to behave in this moment? And same with I learned this before coaching, but I learned to stop yelling at my kids, because I understood over the years of my poor kids getting yelled at, but I understood finally, okay, every time I yell at my kids, I'm always scared. I'm scared they're not going to turn out to be the human beings I need them to be. I'm scared something's going to go wrong. I'm scared they're not going to get the education that they need. I'm always scared of something. And so when I would, and I've kind of broken myself of this, not that I never yell, I certainly do, but not near. It's very rare now, but I broke myself of it to just pause and go, okay, what are you afraid of here? What's really going on? And so you can do it with the sensations in your body. You can do it with just asking yourself questions. And then this DBT sounds fantastic too. And it has all kinds of tools. I had heard of that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I actually taught it in a video. It just sounded like it would be effective.
It's amazing. But it's funny you say that about your client feeling the anger in their arms. And one of the later skills in, like I said, there's 12 skills, is actually when you feel it. So dialectical means doing the opposite of what you feel. So that like not your feelings aren't necessarily facts is one thing. So although you're feeling it, the rationale that caused it might not be the fact. I wouldn't be great at explaining it, but the actual skill for that, if you feel it in your hands, the first thing you do is clench, and it's actually to be open palms up, and open is actually the physiological response to anger. It completely softens you just by that, just by opening your palms, and it really works. So it's very interesting that she was saying she felt the tension in her arms firstly. But yeah, there's a skill for every part of it. And a lot of it is communication as well, and how we, like that, because usually when we go to anger, we're overwhelmed. And so when we try to express ourselves, we're usually expressing ourselves in the worst possible way. And, to just articulate, well, how do you get what you want from this situation? You identify the problem, identify how this problem harms you or the person that has caused it, and what needs to be done to rectify the problem. And they're all skills for DBT, but skills that can be used in sales. But when you begin to identify the issues, you can rationalize things a lot better, because you're using this, what they call actually your wise mind. It's not your emotional off the rails mind. It's this very rational way of thinking. And I found that really did help me a lot.
Good. Yeah. So we're just about out of time. So I want people that want to find April to know where to do that. Have we talked about what you do?
Oh gosh, well, you can find me on Instagram. So obviously I do consultancy work more for setting up a beauty and aesthetic practices are my specialty. However, I have ADHD, so I have had a myriad of companies. I'm very prolific in setting up businesses. But you can find me on Instagram. My handle is at Aesthetic Business Consultancy. So I'm sure it'll be in the show notes, just because in Ireland we spell aesthetic a bit differently. And believe it or not, I actually teamed up with an old friend of mine who also was diagnosed. She's 40 this year and was diagnosed with ADHD a year ago. And I hadn't seen her in 10 years. And it turns out we were doing the same job. So we teamed up, and we have amalgamated our forces. So we've joined forces, and we are at our handle on Instagram is at a house of bosses. And yeah, you can find just two middle-aged women telling you how to start a business, and especially when you have ADHD and you can't remember where you put your keys.
Very good. Well, thank you, April. I sure appreciate you being on here today. I've enjoyed my time working with you, and I just appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much. It was my pleasure. And sure enough, I'll be back on your book soon. I can only imagine once life throws another curveball, I'm there.
All right. Well, it's good to talk to you today.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for your time and especially your attention today. If you haven't looked into the ADHD Academy, you'll want to do that. This is my membership with bingeable courses, weekly live coaching, new courses every month, a community of like-minded people, and more. Be sure to head over to www.learntothrivewithadhd.com/membership to get the details. See you next week.